Welcome to Leadership Rules, where we believe leadership isn't just a role, it's a way of life. Whether you're leading a team, a community, or simply leading yourself, we're here to help you unlock the rules to lead your life with purpose and impact. I'm Nick Caniglio, joined by my co-host, Marnie Stockman, and together we have co-authored Lead It Like Lasso, and we're thrilled to have you with us today. So welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having
Today's
me.
guest is Janet Schijns.
Oh, and we have known Janet for a while now. I had heard her name many times before I landed in the tech world's half Facebook group that you had started. And if anyone's in the tech or channel world, chances are they've already heard your name. And if not, they're certainly in for a treat. Just a bit about Janet before we hop in. She's the CEO of JS Group, which is a powerhouse in channel strategy and business transformation. She's been recognized as one of the top 10 women in technology and a Channel Futures Influencer of the Year. Janet's led multi-billion-dollar P&Ls, spearheaded innovation in partner ecosystems, and helped organizations of all sizes drive measurable growth. So beyond those impressive accolades, she's passionate about empowering leaders to thrive in really an ever-changing business landscape, especially in this world of technology. So I love this next line because her business of no nonsense advice, that's my favorite from anyone, sharp insights and a little bit of fun, make her true standout in leadership and in the channel space. So we're super excited to have you, Janet. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's great to see you both.
Good to see you too. So we like to start off with biscuits from the ball, biscuits with the boss, a little Ted Lasso throwbacks. We've got some quick, hard-hitting questions. First concert, best concert.
Oh, first concert, Charlie Daniels Band.
Okay.
Nice.
With my dad, and my dad caught the roach clip, so that's a story.
Oh, all right. How old were you when this happened?
Young.
Okay. Did you know what was going on?
No, he did. He was a police officer.
Oh.
That was fun. So that was first concert. Best concert, I'm going to go with Jimmy Buffett. It's just so much fun and just makes you feel like part of a community. And there's better musicians, but there's not a better time than a Jimmy Buffett concert. May he rest in peace.
Yeah. Shout out to the parrot heads out there. Love it.
That might be my favorite answer of first concert, best concert, by the way. That little segment.
A little bit easier. Coffee or tea?
Oh, coffee, but decaf because I'm naturally caffeinated.
Oh, you and me both.
I like
Nobody
that
wants
too.
to see this. I'm happy.
I said the same thing. Channel strategy, disrupt it or defend it?
Disrupt it. Especially
Love
now, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Leadership, more art or science?
Definitely science. The artists are the ones that wonder why they don't get ahead.
Okay. I like that.
And do you have a favorite Ted Lasso quote?
I love all of Ted Lasso. So I just want to say, love your book too. So if anybody hasn't read it, selfless plug for you, they can read it. I don't know that I have a favorite quote. I think a favorite moment, which is that everybody should be a goldfish.
Oh,
right?
Yes.
Have that short-term memory and just forget your failures and go forward. That theme that he had about the goldfish, I think is fun.
that is a great one. So we'll transition into more, a little longer response questions, and the goldfish one or that one is always a good place to start with his quotes. But can you tell us a bit about, I gave a little bit of your background, but maybe a little bit more of your leadership journey? Because honestly, as I looked at your background, I thought, well, I don't think I can do this justice.
I have that interesting story of somebody who left college as a finance major, only to find out that I hated finance. I lasted 3 days trading euro dollars at Garvin Guy Butler in the city. And my boss there told me, like, good news, bad news. Good news, I got you an interview at L'Oreal. Bad news, not so much here. And that started me on a leadership journey where I went there. And as I was working through their companies, I got actually exposed to the channel. IBM came in with a partner to do a presentation. I was at the Sandoz division of L'Oreal Lancôme. And it was awful. And I said to them, like, stop, just shut up, get out of the room. Let's go back and rebuild it differently and come back in because I really need your technology. But like, oh my goodness. And they offered me a consulting job and I left corporate America and started my consulting firm. And then 10 or so years later, I was working on a Motorola project, and Motorola said, how about if we buy your firm and you come in and head our channel? And I was like, hey, that's really interesting. I think I'll do that. So I went from corporate to entrepreneur to corporate. And then Motorola kind of did a friendly trade in Verizon. When I joined Verizon, Verizon did not yet have the iPhone. So the Motorola relationship was super important. People always question where did the Droid come from?
Mhm.
Like the Motorola Droid, the Samsung Droid. This was a term only Verizon used. Background. Was definitely part of that team. Star Wars fans who bought the Droid term for very little, by the way, because Star Wars wasn't hot then. Like it
Oh,
was
interesting.
good for Verizon. And then realized that I wanted to get back into the entrepreneurial world, but I was the chief channel officer at Verizon, which meant I basically touched everybody and everything and every client, and my non-compete was pretty robust. And so Jared Smith had joined Office Depot as their CEO, and he and I were chatting, and he said, hey, I'll take a year, 2 years, anything you can give me as Janet Schijns, I'll take as our CMO. And I said, I probably get away with that. And I went to Verizon and said, I really want to go back to my entrepreneurial roots. I know I have a stiff non-compete. If I go be EVP CMO at Office Depot, does that work? And they said yes, and we left the best friends and still do work with them today. And then as soon as that was up, my non-compete 2 years, then I started back up my entrepreneurial journey of owning JSG. So it's kind of like corporate entrepreneur. So someone asked me last week, are you going to go corporate again? I was like,
Yeah.
entrepreneur is where I'm at. Those 2 stints in corporate were very rewarding, but very frustrating for an entrepreneur. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
and I now sit on publicly traded company board, VC boards. So I get to sit at the top of those corporate endeavors still. So not losing the corporate connectivity, but I just can't imagine sitting back in corporate. So that's a little bit just quick. I mean, you can imagine there's a million highlights in that story I didn't share, but that's kind of my journey through corporate and back to entrepreneurism.
Wow. So you look a lot younger than 180 years old, because that's what I imagine you are with all that experience. What a journey.
I love you. Yeah, I love you. But yeah, no, I love you. I take care of things, but,
Yes.
I use a lot of face product. Yes, my husband, he'll tell you, but yeah, and I always tell people the channel is good for your health because it's one of the warmest communities you could ever find. And I've spent most of my career with the channel, whether it was retail at Office Depot or bars and MSPs and, agents at Verizon. It's really a family. So every day I get to be with people that I love. And I think it keeps you young.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's awesome. So with all this experience and all these different stops along the way and these positions, and you've had the ability to lead clearly, we're always curious. Obviously, that's what we talk about on a very consistent basis as leadership. What do you define as impactful leadership, and are there certain qualities that you believe are really critical for a leader to have in order to inspire and drive teams and partners?
Yeah, I do. And obviously it's changing, right? In a world where humans are being augmented by AI, you have to kind of evolve your leadership functionality because some of
Yeah.
your leadership plays don't necessarily work with bots or agents, as our friends at Microsoft now are calling them. Because
Yeah.
agent sounds better than bot, I think. But anyway, I think a couple key things about being a good leader. So I think the first one is that you listen a lot more than you talk. And a lot of leaders could learn that lesson, right? You don't have to be, that's one of the reasons I love Ted Lasso. You don't have to be an expert at what you do. Lee Iacocca didn't have to know how to change a car tire, and Ted Lasso didn't have to know football, soccer, right? You don't have to be an expert in the subject matter. You have to be an expert in people. And so to be an expert in people, you got to listen. And really listen. And one of the things I pride myself on is asking very basic questions when I first take on a team, very basic. And I tell people that I'm going to ask you very basic questions. You're going to think I should know the answer, but I'm listening to your answer. I want to know
Yeah.
what your answer is. And you find there's such a disconnect. If you ask 5 people on the same team, the same basic question, you get 5 very different answers, or you get 5 very close answers and you go, this is a team in synergy. So listening is the first thing. The second is a life motto. I actually live my personal life this way too, which is to be kinder than the situation calls for, always. Good leaders are not people that beat people up, that put the fear of God into people. Another good Ted Lasso, right? He's very good at that too. Be kinder than the situation calls for. Even in the worst of situations, it's going to be okay. How do we learn? Fail fast, come back. It's okay that you failed. Kind of embrace that and be kind about it. I think is a key one. And then I think the third one is recognize the talent in people and don't worry about the positions. I've never drafted for positions. I draft for talent. I'll meet somebody. My husband actually laughs about this. I have like a whole file, like with, in Excel with like pivot tables, right? With skills I think people have. And then I'm constantly matchmaking them into a role because I like to collect people. So, and that helps you in business because all of a sudden all the people you collected are in positions of power, and you never leave Team Shines is what I tell everybody. Once you're on my team, you're always on my team. And that goes two ways. I'm going to help you, but you might have to help me. And so it's very effective.
Wow. Those are three great nuggets. And I love, being, kinder than the situation calls for. I've never heard it said that way before. I mean, we talk about kindness all the time, and I'm going to steal that if you don't mind that.
My dad,
that is a
my
favorite.
dad was when that was the only thing he ever used to tell me. Every single piece of advice was always be kinder than the situation calls for. And he always ended it with every single time.
Yeah.
Not
Wise
just when
words.
you feel like it, right? Every single time. And there are days where that's very hard. But
no question. My mom always said, like, get more flies with honey type of thing, and with the kindness bit. And recently,
doesn't mean you're weak, by the way. I want to point out to leaders, kindness doesn't make you weak. In fact, attacking people is what makes you weak. Small people attack people instead of help them. And people sometimes just think kindness makes you weak.
I literally said to Nick this morning, the old, don't take my kindness for weakness type of thing.
Underestimate me. Go ahead.
Yeah, please do. That will be fun for both of us. My sister was getting snarky in a family text thread, and my mom just put PQ. And I was like, "Oh, nice. That's clever, Mom. Mind your P's and Q's. Like you're not being nice." My sister's name is Karen, and she doesn't listen to this podcast, so I'll totally call her out.
At least she has the right name, Marnie. Look at that.
We all agree. We all agree. So I like those three nuggets. I think is really cool. I too am a collector of people, so I love that bit of it. So if you were an emerging leader, aiming to make an impact in an organization or an industry, what advice would you give them? Would it be one of those three nuggets, or would you have another tactical piece of advice?
I would. Start with your career plan. For goodness sakes, document where you want to go and be like overly optimistic. You want to be CFO, CEO, CMO, like pick your place and put a career plan together. Don't leave it to chance. New leaders a lot of times jump in and they think, I'm just going to jump in and I'm going to make changes and I'm going to, inspire people and I'm going to give these big talks that people are going to go, ooh, right? But first you should write your career plan down. Where do you want to go? What experiences do you need to have? What successes do you need to have? And then you should lead your team towards them and you getting where you want to go. One of the most meaningful things emerging leaders can do is do your career plan. I have a one-page template if anybody ever needs it, but I know your book also has some great tools. And then take your whole team through it, right? Get everybody to say, this is where I want to go. This is who I want to be. This is what I see as successful, and then lead to that. Now, the other three still are very valid, right? Listen more than you talk, be kind, and put your people first. But if you get a career plan and you get everybody in your organization to have a career plan, and then you put that all together and say, okay, what are the big things we would need to do to succeed that people would see us as those leaders, not just me, but everybody beneath me rising up, right? That's how I think you get great leaders, is they move the team. And you see this, like you see people. I'll pick on people from my past. Lowell McAdam, CEO at Verizon, who was just the most lovely, wonderful man. I have a very funny story about him later if you want to hear it. And he really surrounded himself with good people early in his leadership career at Verizon. And those people went up with him, right? They built the business together. And you saw those people in the C-suite with him, before he retired, and one of them obviously becoming CEO. So I think he's a testimony, an engineering guy from Cornell, CEO of Verizon. Nobody would have picked that guy, who liked to crawl under cars and fix them was going to be the guy, but he was the guy. And I think it's because he did that early on.
That's awesome. Now, I'm curious as you talk about, these keys and, and for emerging leaders building their career plan. Is that something you did yourself, or has this kind of evolved kind of over
No,
time?
I actually, I had a fabulous first boss.
Okay.
Not the one that got rid of me in 3 days, the next one. And he was like, what do you want to be? Like, my first conversation with him wasn't like after I was hired, wasn't, okay, here's your job and here's what you're going to do. And it was, hey, we're going to spend about an hour together, and let's just document where you want to go. What do you want to do? What interests you? What do you love? And at the time, you're recently out of college and you're thinking, what's happening? Like,
Yeah.
This isn't what I think is supposed to happen. But he taught me that. And it was like, what's your first act? What's your second act? What's your third act? He had been, prior to getting into corporate America, he was a theater major. And so he believed your career was like a play. It has a beginning, you set it up, right? You have your kind of, it has like a storyline that you follow. What's your story? What are they going to applaud for at the end? That you got to what? And by the way, there's no bad answer. If you want to stay an individual contributor for your whole career because you've got, whatever, you love doing what you do. Let's say you're a chef, right? You don't want to end up running 10 restaurants. You want to be a chef. There's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love the whole story piece. Marty and I talk about stories all the time. And we also talk about, in terms of leadership, we talk about the leading off and considering your core values a lot. We view that as kind of the first thing, especially in terms of personal leadership, that you should really consider. And you don't have to do this, but I'm curious if you were willing to share some of your core values and maybe some examples of how they might have guided some of your decisions or your approach as you went on your career journey.
Absolutely. One of the things I think about core values is they don't change easily, right? And so I always find that people think that they can just evolve their core values and they'll be okay. And that is really not the case, at least not in my experience. That's not been the case. And so I always kind of reference back to what are the core values I started with and where are my core values today? And my core values are, pretty much around being a leader. So my first one is always to be impeccable with your word, right? If you're going to say it, then you need to do it. And I think that's one that everybody should take to heart as a core value, right? Yeah. Keep your word. And part of that is functioning with very high integrity, right? I have never, nor will I ever compromise my ethics for anyone or anything. And, of us, if you're going to, say it, you do it, and you function with high integrity, that's a really good start in core values, but I don't stop there. And I have actually documented these. I go through these every week on our team meeting at JSG. I end every meeting with the core values of our company. And these are included in that. The next one is really don't make assumptions. So question, listen, learn. And then your opinions. I talked about that as my leadership thing, right? Like just question, listen, learn. And the final, we talked about kinder in the situation, so I don't have to talk about that. But I really do believe that if you really think about, and we had at Verizon something called the Credo, and that's a little bit what our JSG core values and my personal core values are a little close to that, right? That you start to have these core values, including that kindness, right? And part of that kindness comes to things like our competitors are challengers. They challenge us to do better. We don't hate them, right? Yeah. And the final thing really that's my core value that I think is it is really important, is probably the concept of failing fast, right? Failing is good. Failing is not bad. And once you have those same core values as I do, right? You're impeccable with your words. You function with really great integrity. You question, you listen, you learn, you're kind. And you understand that you're in a competitive environment, but in a positive way. I think the team then becomes a family. So everybody has the same core values, and then you become Team Shines for life, as I always say, because we share the core values. The people that don't share the core values have a hard time being part of the family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. We have felt the culture clash previously, where
Bad.
where our core values were bumping up against, what the company claimed their core values were, but they
Right.
weren't really acting on it.
Exactly. Listen, culture will eat it for lunch every day. Like, people
Yeah.
say, "Oh, we believe in integrity," except we cheat with our salespeople.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
well, then you
Yeah.
don't actually believe in integrity.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
we
How
like
does
to
that
fail
play out
fast,
for
except
you?
we never make a decision. Like we don't make any decisions that could allow us to fail. We just float along. So yeah, so you really see it quickly if there's a disconnect.
Yeah. It's so funny because I feel like you've already said many, like at the very outset, I was like, that is why she is our people. And then you went on, I was like, and it continues to grow. But one of the things that we talk about is mentoring. As we're helping young folks, and you kind of mentioned it at the beginning that you get into the shine circle, and I feel like there's certainly some pun on that we can absolutely. I'll work on that. But did you have?
Science for life is what I tell everybody.
Yeah, I love that. Did you have a mentor as part of your journey? Was it that first boss? And is there something specific that I think step one, you've already told us, right? They created a career plan for you. Is there something else they did to help you grow?
Yeah. So I've had a series of mentors. I think, well, first of all, my first mentor is long gone, like physically long gone. So that's very sad. But that happens as you go forward in your career. But I've had a series of mentors and also a series of sponsors. And, there's a difference, right? So a mentor works with you on skills, works with you on knowledge, helps you develop, helps you go through that career plan. But a sponsor is somebody who, when the job is brought up or the project's brought up or whatever is brought up, they're advocating for you in the room. They're saying, how about Janet? Right? Like she'd be good. And they're not the same people. Your sponsor is never going to have the time to mentor you. And so I have kind of had, so many mentors through the years. And in the most recent years, I have started doing what I call reverse mentoring. So I actually ask people who are very, very junior to me in career level and age to be my mentor. And in exchange, I'll be their mentor. And the reason for that is because I noticed that there was boundaries they didn't have that I had because of my experience level. I had seen things were always done this way, or things seem to be done this way. Social media was a great example. 7 or 8 years ago, I was, about social media. Now I get all my leads for my business from it. Why? Because I had reverse mentors. Michelle Ragusa McBain is a great example. You can probably know Michelle, was one of my reverse mentors when she was initially at Cisco more than a decade ago. She's now worked for me twice. I've promoted her twice and moved her family to Florida with me. And I love her and Jay to pieces. And part of it is because she was so good for me in teaching me kind of new tricks, I guess I would say. And I hope I was good for her, right? And so I don't think that mentor is always your boss or somebody in a senior position. I think it's the person that can grant you the experiences you need. And that's where you come back full circle to that career plan. If you crafted your story right, you're saying, I need these experiences, then you're going to get them where you get them. And I will say probably my best ever mentor was Gene Delaney at Motorola. He was just phenomenal. So I tell this story because I think listeners do well with stories, right? So I sold my company to Symbol Motorola, part of that whole acquisition. I came in working for Kathy Palladino, fabulous woman, president. And 4 weeks after I, mind you, sold my company, okay, so I was now working for Motorola, they ripped out the entire layer of leadership and replaced them with this Motorola team that had been there forever and knew absolutely nothing about the part of the business I had joined. Uh, and it was, one of those moments, right, where you're like, oh my God, I sold my company and now 4 weeks later, I don't know a single person and I don't even know who I'm going to work for. I don't know who I'm working for. I don't know what's happening. And Gene became just absolutely not only the best president and boss ever, but also a great mentor. And it started with he and I were getting ready to go out to the town hall. I now knew I was going to work for him. And they were all people he didn't know, right? It was in a location that they had acquired the company symbol. And he said, I don't know any of these people. I'm looking out at a couple thousand people, right, out in the audience for this massive town hall. And whoa, I just see 2,000, people that I got to learn and get to know. And I said, you know what I see? And he said, know what? I said, I see 2,000 people that are nervous about whether they can pay their mortgage, whether they can pay their kids' tuition, whether they can keep their job. That's what I see. I don't see 2,000 workers that want you to know what they do. I see 2,000 people that are scared to death. And he turned around to me and he said, we're going to do great together. And he walked out with the opening line, I know you're all nervous. And when he came back, he said to me, God bless you, because that you were right. I would have went out there with, talk about the business, he said, and you saw through it, right? They were nervous. And he became a fabulous mentor up to and including when I got my job offer from Verizon, him saying, don't sign it. Let me see it. Let's negotiate. And me freaking out saying, I'm not going to negotiate. This is an amazing offer. And he was like, Janet, they selected you from all these candidates. Do you really think that just because you negotiate, they're going to change their mind? And I was like, yes. And he said, well, then that's weakness. Like, no, they're not going to. And he got me a lot more money. So God bless him. But, what a mentor to, leaving him. And he's still mentoring and continues to this day to be just a fabulous human. So.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I love the fact that you talked about him being your mentor, right? But you also gave an example of the reverse mentoring,
Exactly.
how you helped him and give him perspective. So you kind of, I think that's awesome.
You
So
have to have that open relationship with your mentor. If it's not a little bit of a two-way street, it's not going to work, right?
Yeah. No, that's great advice and insight. So you talked about that time where, they kind of ripped the whole team away from you. One of many, I'm sure, very difficult situations that you've dealt with. We're curious, how do you, like, when you run into those difficult situations, and again, with your journey, I'm sure there's been so many of them. How do you keep your emotions in check, and how do you remain positive, and how do you stay true to your core values, and all those different things that we've already talked about when things get bad and you're in difficult situations?
Chocolate helps. Chocolate helps. I'm not a biscuit girl. I'm a chocolate girl. But honestly, and I really believe this, I think it's a combination of two things. One, I naturally have a good sense of humor. So I tend to try to like a little bit of gallows humor when things go badly, right? Little just like, oh, this is funny. But the second thing is I'm always separated work Janet and home Janet. So, and this will make sense in a second. I don't get as emotional, I don't think, because home Janet has nothing to do with work Janet. Like, she's not the same person. It's almost, my family used to laugh about it. I'd come home, take all the makeup off, take the outfit off, put the sweatpants on, come down like a different person. But physically, that was true. I would physically drive around the neighborhood until I was in the right frame of mind to come home because I just didn't want to bring it home with me. And it went as far as when I was at Verizon and, pretty high up, right? One of my friends came to visit me, and I really never talk about work with my friends, never. They really don't know what I do. They don't understand it. They don't care. And her nephew was working at Verizon, and she said, hey, I want to go see her. And he was like, he can't really do that. She was like, what do you mean you can't really do that? And he was like, she's like, you can't really do that. He was like, no. I want to go see my friend. So they called my admin and she let him in, and we got in the office, and my friend said, are you like the secretary for somebody important or something? Like, she seriously did not know, right, that I was leading this massive team at this massive company. She had no idea. And that's how I kept my emotions in check. Because the people that were really, truly important in my life freaking clue that I was this, chief channel officer at Verizon. They were like, this is just Janet. You know, I don't know what they thought he did, but it certainly wasn't that. And so I really think that's what helped me. And that kind of separation. And the second part was that kindness, that being kinder than the situation called for meant that when I hit hard times or when I had a hard situation, people were very willing to help me. You know, like the crankiest person, who everybody was like, that's the crankiest person in the world, right? I could go to and go, I don't need help. They're like, all right, you know, I guess I owe you. You were nice to me when X happened or Y happened. And so I really think I managed to keep the emotionality under check. Now, I will give the final thing. Early in my career at L'Oreal, they taught me that if you run your tongue in the roof of your mouth very aggressively, kind of like, you can't cry, it's physiologically impossible. It does something that your tear ducts can't release if you're doing that. And it's something that they learned doing makeup. Like if somebody's eyes were teary, right, you couldn't do makeup on them. So it was something they learned to cope with that. But I've used that more times than I care to admit to make sure I didn't cry.
Wow.
Well, that's a great trick that I had not ever heard before. It's kind of funny you mentioned the cranky person. I worked at the board office in the school system, and there was a cantankerous grump of a human who would walk into work just head down, rah rah rah, and I'd say, "Good morning, sunshine," and she and they were like, "Why would you call her that? She is not a sunshine." I said, "She will be to me." And yeah.
They love the hardest. The grumpy ones love the hardest and come to your aid the hardest, right? If you win them over.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So this is called leadership rules. So what is a leadership rule that has helped you? I feel like it's the kindness one, but is there another leadership rule?
Yeah, my leadership rule definitely is the kindness. But I will tell you there is a second one, and I think it's important, which is that, you know, you race to a challenge. So my second kind of leadership rule is I love a challenge. Give me a challenge, I'm going to race to it. Day to day, same. That's not a great leadership rule, right? Like just keep everything the same, right? Just keep doing what you're doing. That's how we've always done it. Business as usual. All those things are horrific. And so after the kindness, I always think, you know what? We race to a challenge. And we embrace it, right? And we understand that challenge is an opportunity. And that's one of my big leadership rules, is to just not allow that to feel like work.
And isn't it amazing once you start to embrace that and you practice that, it gets easier and easier and easier to do.
I'll say things to the team like, look what we get to do. How lucky are we get to do this, as opposed to, oh my gosh, this client is so messed up. You know, which could be the approach, right? This client is so messed up. They have nothing. They have, oh my God, you know. And instead I'm saying, look what we get to do. How exciting is this, right? Like we were racing to this challenge. We love a challenge. So
that's where innovation can occur. Right, like a new competitor in the field. Well, let's think about a way to market around that. This makes it interesting.
Exactly. And because, again, I've separated church and state, when I go home, nobody knows whether I won or lost. So they're still just my friends. I'm still just Janet from the neighborhood, right? Like I'm not Janet the whatever, you know.
Wow. So Janet, I have to tell you, this has been awesome. So insightful. You know, I don't often take notes, but I took quite a few notes on this call. So I appreciate the wise words and everything that you shared with us today. It's been really helpful. So thank you.
Right back at you guys. I have all kinds of pages in my note in my book page. And actually, my daughter's opening a bookstore, and I told her, hey, you got to reach out to Marnie and see, or Nick, and see if they'll come do an author day. You know, once you get things rolling. Yeah, we'll get the whole channel there.
Oh, that's awesome. So, for folks listening, why don't you talk a bit about your company and where folks can find you, how they could get into the Schijns circle?
The Schijns family. Yeah, become part of the member. So our website is jsgnow, like, you know, now, .com. So just from a website standpoint, or you can connect with me always under Janet Schijns at LinkedIn. Text, call, do whatever you want. My actual phone number is on LinkedIn, so feel free to text me. Please don't call me at 2 a.m. Mindful I'm on the East Coast. And what we do at a really high level is we help businesses accelerate sales and marketing. Primarily, we do that through and with the channel, so with channel partners, MSPs, VARs, resellers, vendors, distributors, etc. But we've done it, for anybody in the tech space. And we really pride ourselves on three things. Our entire team has carried the bag. So former channel chiefs, former channel leaders, former CMOs. There's nobody that's a former editor that used to write about the space or something, right? They actually did it, so they understand what it feels like. Two, we try to really work on solutions, not pretty PowerPoint. So a lot of consultants, it's all about the pretty PowerPoint, and then the rest of the team at the company sees it and goes, "What? They said to do what?
That won't work for us."
And the whole board is thinking you can do it, right? So that's bad. So we pride ourselves on executable, and we'll make pretty PowerPoints. We give good PowerPoints. Don't worry about that. But we're just not gonna, tell you what to do that isn't realistic. And then the third thing we really do is help people get sales. So we have a very, very active marketing group that goes out and gets business. We did almost $5 billion in funnel for and with partners last year. And we pride ourselves on saving the channel, which is our mission statement, and getting leads for the channel is part of that commitment.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we love it. We have a good time.
You can tell.
Yeah.
I mean, that's obvious. That's awesome.
It's fun. It's really fun.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
So, okay, I'm going to give you guys points, because most people, when I go, I have a funny story. At some point in time, they go, all right, you're going to tell that story before we finish.
Oh.
Right? I'll give you points. Do you want the funny story, the funny leadership story, or not a funny leadership story?
Actually, we do want the funny leadership story,
Okay,
yes.
here's my funny leadership story of the week. I will not name which company I was at, but I will tell you that all leaders have moments of weakness, right? Moments where you're just annoyed or frustrated or whatever. And so it was about 8:00 at night. I was at the elevators. I was with a teammate. We were complaining about someone who was a peer, right? This person was a peer of mine, and we were complaining about a peer of ours because we had an operations review the next day, and the person had not come through with their data, and we were very frustrated, right? And I said, he's lucky. He's lucky. I don't know where he parks in the parking lot, or I would freaking run him over with my car right now. Jersey.
Yeah.
And we both laughed, and we turned around because I heard I turned around, and the CEO of the company was standing behind me. And he's like, "Bad day?" I'm like, and he's like, "How, you're going to be okay tomorrow?"
Worse right this minute.
Right. He's like, "You're going to be okay for the ops review tomorrow?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so." And he goes, "Okay, all right, good." And he goes, "By the way, who are you talking about?" And I was like, he's like, "Who?" I was like, "Okay," told him the name. Next day, go on the ops review, CEO, CFO, COO, right? And I wore red shoes, trying to pick myself up, right? I'm bright red shoes. And he goes, "Like the shoes?" He goes, "So if you click those 3 times, do you disappear out of the room?" And I said, "No, you guys do." And he's like, "Oh." And he's like, "Good answer." I was like, okay, we go in now. I give my presentation. It goes much better than I thought it was going to go. And at the end of my presentation, he goes, "Janet, just a quick note for you." And I said, "Oh, sure." Now, mind you, the CEO of a big company. I said, "Sure." And he goes, "Level 3, parking garage 6. It's And everybody in the room is like, "What's he talking about?" It was so fun. It was just such a human moment. He's like, level, and I'm sure he was making it up, right? Level 6.
Yeah, but still.
Building 6 to BMW. But it was just so funny, and I had been so tense the whole time, right?
Yeah, that would have been helpful an hour earlier.
And my other peers started laughing, right? The 3 of us, and everybody else in the meeting was like, "What is happening?"
Yeah.
And it was just that wonderful moment where I realized that he was such a great boss that he understood I was frustrated. He thought it was fun, right? He thought it was fun. He didn't think it was like, "Oh, she's an HR problem,"
Yeah.
And so it was just a wonderful feeling of belonging, but also a really funny story.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Love it.
One of those fun leadership moments. So.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that one. That's excellent.
Went from worst moment to best moment in 10 hours. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We super appreciate it.
You too. And thanks so much. And again, your book is fabulous. So anybody that hasn't read it, get it. Get a bunch of Post-it notes because you're going to need it because there's so much great learning.
You're kind. Thank you so much, Janet.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.